I could go anywhere. I would jump in the boat and go to Long Island up in Gardiner's Bay and catch scup in the month of May and June, and I would go on the backside of Long Island fluking. I would go down to Nantucket catching flounders, and you know, I went anywhere I wanted. Now the guys are regulated. Well, you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, and time controlled, and looks to me like a situation that's got out of hand because it's hurting too many people. It's not only hurting the fishermen, it's hurting all the surrounding businesses, and plus the public. The price of fish has gotten so high. I mean, years ago they could come down the dock and we'd give them a fish. Nowadays, fish is so high that you can't afford to give them away, and the expenses are so great.
I had the VML built, and I only had that for, I don't know, 6 months. And then I see the regulations coming, I see the fuel oil prices coming, and I decided to get rid of that.
47, 48 years ago, National Marine Fisheries Service would come down to the boat and ask you how they could help you. That doesn't happen anymore. Now it's how we can hurt you.
The Magnuson Act is pretty good, except for the rebuilding provision, which doesn't make scientific sense. Over the last decade or so, we can see that we don't have the right statistics. We don't have a program so that statistics are readily accessible to everyone. We have confusion in the stock assessment techniques. We have regulation that people think is not sensible.
The Magnuson Act has to be amended. We have to get away from this idea that every species of fish being managed has to be at the maximum sustainable yield level. That's a biological impossibility. You can't have a bunch of competing species all approaching maximum levels of abundance at the same time in the same area.
You can't have an ocean of every kind of fish at the same time. It's like your backyard being full of deer. It can't be full of deer and coyotes at the same time. If it's full of coyotes, it's not going to be full of deer. Fish are the same way. You can't have an ocean full of striped bass and have lobsters and flounders and other kinds of fish, because fish are predators. They eat each other. Nature has a balancing act of its own.
The Mid-Atlantic, which is the area I'm most familiar with, there's 8 or 9 or 10 species which are all fairly close competitors, all feeding on the same stuff. And it's impossible to have them all at these high levels at the same time, yet that's what the system presumes can happen if they're managing right, which means if they're restricting fishermen enough. It's impossible. Fisheries can't be forced to respond to the numbers that the computer modelers think they should be responding to. They can't respond in the time frame that they're required to.
There are a lot of issues with statistics, with how the statistics are handled, how the data is analyzed. Are people being treated fairly?
We're also facing a lot of these observer programs on board the boats, and you know, we try to work with them, but at the same time, you know, I think that a lot of this information that's gathered is sitting in a box somewhere. And that's typically the feeling of every fisherman that I've met. You know, the data is, by the time the data gets used or they finally figure out how to put this stuff together, it's too late. You need to use some common sense. They need to act by what they see in the ocean today, not wait 5 years down the road when it's too late. We don't want to harm the ocean. We want to help these ecosystems. And leaving data in a box for 5 years or 3 years isn't going to help anybody. It's just costing us more money, it's costing the government more money, and it is a high risk for our ecosystems. They need to get serious, not just with their data, but they need to get serious talking to fishermen, talking to the guys that are out there, and open their eyes so they can see what we see. Use a little common sense. Somebody needs to be the boss, stand up, take control, and balance this thing, or we're doomed.
Just made a tow here for an hour and a half with a 6.5-inch bag and a 6-inch net to show you what the inshore fleet should be doing this time of year, which is catching fluke. There's a record biomass of fluke in the ocean and have been for the last 3 years. We're at the lowest coastwide quota we've ever been at, which means we have to throw these over. We're only allowed 50 pounds a day of these beautiful fluke.
The United States has more fisheries regulations than any other nation. We fish with the largest mesh. We close most of our productive areas at their most productive times. We limit the time our people can spend on the water.
Our government has reduced our ability, the fishermen's ability, to make a living or get ahead or work as hard as they want to.
It's not only an economic engine. In fact, the studies say that it's a billion-dollar industry. Not only the vessels, but then all the ancillary services that go into either supporting the vessels or creating this conveyor belt from the ocean to the dinner plate.
It takes a certain level of fishing business to maintain the infrastructure that the fishing boats need to stay in business. And if you reduce the number of boats, if you reduce the number of fish coming into a port, the more you reduce that, the more difficult it is for all of the necessary support facilities to stay in business.
The Fisheries Service, and to some extent, it's Congress's fault, has vilified fishermen.
You can pick up a advanced science book for 11th and 12th graders in any high school across this country, and you'll see quotes from our favorite charitable trusts that list the kind of gear that we're using and how destructive it is to the ocean. All of the things that we can say that's just pure bull, simple as that, and we can prove it, are out there in people's minds.
Did anyone ever stop to figure out just how many fish there are in the sea? Well, there are more than have ever been caught anyway.